The story begins with a group of mercenaries on a mission in a dark forest. They come across a man who appears to be asleep and decide to attack him, launching a spear that pierces his chest. But just as they think they have succeeded, the man reveals that he was not asleep and was in fact aware of their presence. He questions why they are attacking him and asserts that he is acting in self-defense. As the mercenaries mock him, the protagonist pulls out a tree branch and uses it as a weapon. The mercenaries scoff at the idea that a tree branch could be deadly, but the protagonist proves them wrong by easily killing one of them with the branch. Then one of the mercenaries is able to identify the power protagonist using, Vise, but it is too late for them to do anything as 4 out of 5 of the mercenaries have been eliminated by Vise, leaving only the leader alive. The leader begs the protagonist to spare him, but the protagonist responds that if he harbors the intention to kill another, he ought to be prepared to die as well. The protagonist then easily killed the leader of mercenaries. After cleaning all the traces, he remembered a phrase from someone named Darian, who told him that the human world was dangerous, but the protagonist replied that on the contrary, the human world was extremely boring. But who is the protagonist? Why was he being pursued? And who is Darini? To find out about this, we have to go back a few years, where some people were discussing the traits that the Demon King left on the world, mainly the Black Forest, which is impossible to reach due to demonic energy, and therefore no one can even approach it. A large land that the kingdom cannot even occupy. It's very complicated, but since no one can survive, it's not worth it. So, they decide to use this place to get rid of people who give them problems. That was exactly what they did with a small child, even with the mother begging. The child had the cursed seed in his chest and was given to the care of the Black Forest to die, a place of total exile where no one had survived. Neither scholars, brave warriors or exceptional mages, criminals and the unwanted were thrown there, had their sentences marked, but if they ever returned, they would have their sins forgiven. One day, a child was born with the cursed seed and was left in the river in the demon realm where no one had ever escaped alive. Cold and hunger killed the child each day that passed, but a seed grew inside his body. Energy broke out of her and covered the child. 12 days passed and with much resistance, the child survived. But one day a beast found him, and the fate of the child was finally decided. 10 years later, the same child was running after a rabbit. When he finally caught the creature, it revealed itself to be the tiger named Alaga. She compliments the young boy on finishing the hunt and asks if he has gotten used to everything. She then pulls out a core from inside the rabbit, saying that all demon creatures have one. If he consumes it, he will become stronger and his core's energy will renew, increasing his life expectancy. The young boy tries to grab it, but Alaga says that he cannot have it as he is not a demon creature, he is a human. If he consumes it, he will become a demon creature and will have to live in that forest forever. The young boy replied that even if doesn't eat, there is no way to get out of the forest. So why not let him be happy? But Alaga responds that he can leave. She said that she met a human who told her that there is a way to escape this forest. He is shocked, saying he will look for him, but Alaga says that the human must have grown old and died by now. But the young boy is determined and sets out to find the human who can help him leave the forest. The protagonist runs in search of another human like him. When he arrives at the location, he realizes that the things there could only have been created by humans. He is thrown to the ground by an old man who asks him who had sent him. The protagonist reveals that he was sent by someone named Alaga, and the old man, named Darian, releases him. The protagonist explains that he simply wanted to meet another human like himself and find a way out of the forest. Darian, however, believes that the human world is not as wonderful as the protagonist thinks, and that humans are cruel and cunning, willing to betray or align with others as necessary. The old man asks Helmut if born in the forest, and the protagonist reveals that he was sent to the forest at birth because of the darkness within him. Darian surmises that the protagonist must be of a high lineage, as otherwise he would have been killed instead of abandoned in the forest. Darian also informs the protagonist that he has a debt to pay to Alaga and warns him that if he ever leaves the forest, he will always be pursued due to the darkness within him and may ultimately die fighting against other humans. Despite this, the protagonist, named Helmut, remains determined. Darian agrees to take him in and teach him how to behave like a human before attempting to leave the forest. He emphasizes the need for the protagonist to become stronger in order to be able to cross the barrier and enter the human world. They then enter Darian's house, where he teaches the protagonist about human habits such as cleaning and provides him with a bed and clothes. Afterward, they return outside and Darian teaches the protagonist about which things are edible and which are not in the forest. In addition to teaching him how to purify food with water and other human customs, the old man, Alaga, also shows the protagonist, Helmut, how to clean the demonic energy from the root organisms that grow in the forest. This is an important step in Helmut's journey, as it allows him to consume the food and not be affected by the dark energy that is present in the forest. As the days passed, Helmut began to complain about the ridiculous tasks he had to do, such as sweeping the old man's house and carrying water. He felt that these tasks were not necessary for his goal of becoming stronger and leaving the forest. One day, Alaga suddenly appears and asks Helmut if he plans to leave the forest after becoming stronger. Helmut tells him that yes, he does plan to leave the forest because he does not belong there. The protagonist continues his training, and Darian apparently sees good potential in him. After training all day, Darian calls the protagonist to eat. It was the first time the protagonist had something so delicious. Darian gets up from the table and says that from tomorrow he will teach him the sword's way. He also gives him a small demonstration by breaking a rock with a simple wooden sword. He tells him that the light coming from the sword is called Vis and that he should imagine it as an invisible source of power that humans can use. The seed inside the protagonist is a similar source of power, but it is dark and uncontrollable. He tells him that the sword's way will help him control it. So, days passed when the protagonist struggled to understand what the old man was saying. The old man thinks that Helmut, despite having the seed inside him and growing up surrounded by beasts, is incredibly rational. He saw something different in him, so he gives the protagonist a small hit with the sword so that he understands the importance of details and movements. Although the movements look identical, the effect when hitting is different. If all your body is involved in the movement, and you dedicate your heart and soul to each movement, you will truly understand it. And so, they continued training. Although it was boring, resting was also part of the training. Helmut and Alaga met again, and Alaga noticed that the protagonist had grown. Helmut tells Alaga that Darian had mentioned something about a debt he had with him. Alaga tells him that he only gave him special permission to live in his territory. Helmut understands that maybe Alaga did not want to fight against Darian. But there was a reason for that. If Darian and Alaga fought, maybe the snake called Naho from the southern region of the forest would take advantage of it. The protagonist asked Alaga if he could beat Daron, but Alaga does not know, because, unlike beasts, humans can use their demon energy, so she is not sure if she could beat Darian. She also tells the protagonist that the snake dislikes Darian because he destroyed the filthy area that the snake had created. Helmut's curiosity is aroused and Alaga takes him to show him the filthy area that he was talking about, which is this human farm. Alaga shows him that those people who look different to him are women in the Noha territory. They were sacrificed as food, and men were treated as slaves. Among them, there was also a leader who would be this old filthy man called Irugo who does practically whatever he wants. The protagonist asks Alaga why he picked him up, but Alaga only tells him that he could not stand the idea of the Noha's livestock increasing in numbers. As they were leaving, they were face to face with the snake Noha. They thought it was asleep, but now its presence makes the protagonist completely frozen. Noha asks Alaga if he can have a bite of that boy that he is taking care of, but Alaga tells Noha that he don't like to eat human males. However, the smell coming from the protagonist makes Noha change his mind. She wants him instead. Alaga and the protagonist manage to escape, and they run to the edge of the forest. Alaga warns Helmut that as Noha has seen him, he shouldn't travel alone. He must stick to the old man. The protagonist asks Alaga if he can also become as strong as Darian and her. Alaga responds that the old man is at a level most humans would not be able to reach. But if the protagonist wants to escape the forest, he must do his very best to become stronger. Just then, the old man arrives there and tells the protagonist that the sun is setting and it is time to return home. At night, the protagonist twisted in pain. Darian tells him that every night before going to sleep, he should eat a little of the poisonous grass, which will help suppress the power of the seed of darkness. Time passed as the protagonist trained and improved, noticing the benefits of the poisonous grass. Darian says that he is now ready to learn the Vis training method, which involves controlling and incorporating the energy of the atmosphere through his sword, and keeping a composed and fluid movement. It was not going to be perfect from the start, but with determination, he continued to train faster and stronger, and eventually, after 4 years, the protagonist had grown significantly, but knew he still had a long way to go. He asks Darian for a duel, but before that, Darian wants to see his Vis. The protagonist initially refuses, but eventually does it, and it's incredible progress despite having the seed in him. The old man thinks that Helmut has the potential to flip the world on its head, whether it's for good or evil. Darian wonders if it's time to let him go. He tells the protagonist that if he stays, the darkness of his seed will increase and he will be unable to cross the divine barrier. He tells him the direction of the human world, and that in certain places the barrier is weaker, but he doesn't know where. The one who seems to know is the leader of the slaves in the territory of Noha. He also warns him that the human world may seem entertaining and exciting, but it's also filled with tragedies. It is something he cannot stop just by having his guard up, and it can't be avoided either. When that time comes, he will feel powerlessness and much pain. He might experience frustration and despair, so the old man tells Helmut to not himself, no matter what comes on his way. Darian cannot accompany him and tells him to come back in the morning for something. Helmut spent the night with Alaga, and for some reason, he felt complicated since he was raised in that place and now he can finally leave. The next morning when he entered Darian's house, he finds him sitting with his eyes closed and saying his name, and seeing that he doesn't answer, he realizes it's time to go. He will never forget the moments he spent with Darian. He grabs the things Darian left him and leaves. Alaga tells him not to feel bad since goodbyes are always hard. Alaga gives the protagonist a necklace that he had been carrying when he was left in the forest. The necklace had his mother's name on it. Alaga tells him that when he leaves the forest, he should look for his mother because she could probably help him. The protagonist needs to go to the human farm because luckily, the snake Noha is in hibernation. However, Alaga can't accompany him because his presence would be noticed immediately. At night, Helmut sneaks into the leader of the slaves' room and threatens him by holding a knife to his throat. The story then shows a small backstory of how Irugo arrived in the forest. Feeling he didn't have enough talent to become a great mage, he turned to dark magic and started to sacrifice humans. The pain and fear of the people he tortured made him eviler and stronger until one day he was discovered. His options were death or exile. He chose the Forest of Roots, where he met the snake Noha, who let him do whatever he wanted in exchange for sacrifices. He gathered all the people that were left in the forest and became the king of the human farm. However, when Noha was hibernating, the beasts from around the area would attack. But even so, Hugo was satisfied with his new life. The protagonist wonders if he is the disciple of Darian that he had heard of. He tells the leader of the slaves that if he doesn't teach him the way out of the forest, he will kill him. He was sure that any mage would have written down how to get out of the forest somewhere. The reason he didn't kill him was because he could make things easier for him. Irugo agrees, and on the way, he tells the protagonist that no one had ever tried to leave the forest before, but Darian probably could have. He asks the protagonist if he had planned on leaving the forest, and when he doesn't respond, he realizes that Darian probably died. They finally reach the place, and Irugo gives Helmut a book of an old mage who couldn't leave the forest, but according to what he had written in the South Waterfall, water and demonic energy weaken the divine barrier. So if he throws water, he might be able to leave the forest. But anyways, anyone with a little demonic energy would turn to ashes when touching the barrier. Before leaving, Helmut ties up the leader of the slaves and tells him to stop being a coward and live his life. Irugo starts using his magic, and with a scream, he wakes up Lord Now to tell him that Darian has died and that his disciple is escaping at this moment. The protagonist is going to have to run like crazy, and just when he thought he had left his territory, Noha appears in front of him. This is where a battle starts in which clearly Helmut is at a disadvantage. After dodging one of his attacks, the protagonist thinks calmly that he was not willing to give up so easily. He was about to attack again, but Helmut dodges again and locates a weak point that he could potentially pierce, which would be his eye. This was the most he could do with his current level. If he continued fighting, he would die. So he decides to take advantage of this moment to escape, which no one would have imagined. The other head of the snake, seeing that its other head was making a charge, decides to eat it. And now it was the protagonist's turn. He receives one of its attacks, but still manages to escape. The snake would have a harder time finding the protagonist without its other head. Helmut was hiding behind a tree complaining about the little damage he had done to Noha, and just when he was about to leave again, he is found by him. Helmut was going to give his last bit of strength to survive, and just when he was about to fight Noha again, Alaga appears to protect him. He tells him to go in search of his freedom, and meanwhile he will face Noha. Days passed in which the protagonist fought with countless beasts, but none as powerful as Noha. He was eternally grateful to Darian and Alaga, and finally, he reaches the place where the waterfall is located. The atmosphere in that place was completely different. Barely any demon energy could be felt, and the darkness was also reacting to the divine barrier. Luckily, he had covered his seed with bis, and out of nowhere a feather falls in his hand, and the beast called Agrel, the ruler of the north of the forest, appears. He notices that the protagonist has a smell of Noah, a smell that he has carried for a long time, which would be the smell of Alaga. The protagonist reveals that he is from Agala's family. This means that the Alaga family had trespassed on his territory, but the protagonist explains that he has other reasons. Tiger, being a very curious beast, listens to the protagonist saying that he will be the first person to cross the barrier, and that he will be the first beast to witness it. So the beast decides to spare his life to see if the protagonist can do it. He also agrees to convey his final words to Ahaga, and Helmut tells him that no matter what happens, to tell her that he managed to cross the barrier, whether he lives or dies. Finally, he jumps into the water and starts to be carried away by the current. This was his opportunity to go beyond the forest of roots and start his adventure in the human world. That is all for today. If you enjoyed the video, please like the video and subscribe to the channel.